Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is for you around the world. Welcome to Spaceflight Now's latest coverage of this mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. A batch of Starlink satellites on board a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Good to be with you all today. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at Kennedy Space Center. I am joining you remotely once again from just outside of the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, after wrapping up nearly a very busy week of astronaut activity, both with the new class of candidates being announced at the beginning of the week and capping things off with some exhaustive briefings and information sessions regarding the forthcoming Artemis 2 mission set to launch now no earlier than February 5th of 2026. We're currently T-minus 57 minutes, 3 seconds and counting to lift off of this Falcon 9 rocket, standing tall at pad 40. This mission is set to be SpaceX's 539th Falcon 9 launch to date, and the 122nd of the year so far. Now, it's a very early hour here for folks in the United States, so certainly appreciate you joining us at this point in the countdown. So to the 240 of you that are with us right now, appreciate you being on board. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button, sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Thanks to our moderator in the chat right now. I've got Aussie Space Girl on tap. And if you do see any of the other mods cruise on in throughout the course of the count, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. You can help make Stephanie's job and that of the other mods that much easier just by following the rules of our chat. We ask that you refrain from delving into over politics and religion. Type your message in English if you would be so kind so that our moderators can respond as appropriate. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them, multiple lines, so that it takes up a good percentage of the chat visual space. And last but not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. We'll all get along swimmingly. This and every other live launch opportunity are made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Amy Ketchum, Mark Pachotnik, Funky Uncle John, Butterfly, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spacelightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch lift-off moments from here in Florida in 4K. Last little bit of housekeeping here. If you have a comment or question about this mission or just want to offer a little bit of support for our coverage today, as BA Technologies just did, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now. And that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. As we're getting going here today, we do have our team out mostly for this one. We, of course, do have another mission coming up later on this morning, which we'll talk about in just a moment here. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast at the moment alongside photographer John Pisani. Adam Bernstein out getting the cameras ready for today's launch attempt, if all goes well, hopefully an actual launch. Michael Caine's been busy getting cameras ready for the next launch, the flight of an Atlas rocket. In fact, all of our photographers have been busy getting ready for that launch, in addition to the one we're hopefully about to see in 53.5 minutes. So if you're not following them on X, now is a good time to do so, since they have quite a bit of work that they've been producing throughout this week, and of course, a couple more launches on tap just today. Adam is at A Burn NYC. Michael is at MD Kane Jr. John Pisani is at John Pisani Photo. Also, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook as well. I just alluded to the Atlas launch. Want to share with you a couple of photos that our team captured at the pad as they were setting remote cameras ahead of the flight of this Atlas 551 configuration rocket. This first image is from Michael Kane along the tracks that are used to transport the rocket on the mobile platform. It goes about a third of a mile from the building directly behind Michael in this camera's vantage point, the vertical integration facility. Pulls out slowly with a whole support train system that includes things like thermal conditioning systems, power supply, communications, and the like, both to the payload as well as to the rocket to make sure everything is staying as expected throughout the whole transport process. You can also see the lightning protection towers stationed around the rocket as well. Moving on, this photo from our Adam Bernstein from the vantage point of the flame trench. As you can see, that's the hollowed out structure immediately in front of the rocket from this perspective. That's where the exhaust will jettison out, and very much where you don't want to have you or your camera placed during launch, since it gets quite active in this spot. And if you want your camera back, this is not exactly the place to place it long term. Finally, a couple of up-close shots of the rocket from John Pisani. You can see the Amazon logo emblazoned on the fairing half from this camera's perspective, as well as the U.S. flag and the Atlas logo, and the ULA logo just beneath that as well. This will be the third flight of Kuiper satellites on board an Atlas V rocket. When this rocket launches, it will be the fifth mission in support of the Kuiper constellation. SpaceX has also flown 2 out of their currently contracted 3 Falcon 9 rockets in support of the Kuiper constellation as well. So it is a big broadband Thursday between the upcoming launch of the Falcon 9 with its 28 Starlink satellites that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen in that live picture, and the upcoming launch of what Amazon hopes will be a rival constellation in Project Kuiper. One more picture from this week. This was also taken yesterday. Those photos from the pad were during remote camera setup yesterday. This is what I was up to yesterday here at the Johnson Space Center, hearing from these 4 individuals. Left to right, you've got Artemis 2 mission pilot Victor Glover. To his left, our right, that is Reed Wiseman, the commander of Artemis 2. And then our 2 mission specialists, Christina Cook and Jeremy Hansen. And as you might be able to see from Jeremy's sleeve, he represents the Canadian Space Agency. We weren't here right at the top of the broadcast when I mentioned Artemis 2 now scheduled to launch no earlier than February 5th. Over the course of the next week, the Orion spacecraft will finish up its launch abort system additions and then roll out to the vehicle assembly building, where it will be integrated onto the rest of the SLS rocket, and then the full stack will be complete. There'll be a series of checkouts throughout the course of the remaining part of the year, and then the rocket will roll out to the pad. There's some work to do once the mobile launcher and the SLS rocket and Orion reach the pad, including some work involving this crew, getting them familiarized with the emergency egress system out at the pad itself. I did ask Charlie Blackwell Thompson, who is the launch director for the Artemis missions, about whether or not they would be riding the slide wire basket system, and was told that no, they'll get familiar with how the system works, but given the proximity to launch at that point, they're not going to be activating the emergency egress system. Obviously, unless it is truly an emergency and it is, in fact, needed. The wet dress rehearsal will take place fairly close to the launch itself again. Right at the beginning of February is the prime opportunity, the first opportunity, I should say. Each month includes just a few or a handful of launch days, between 4 and 8 per month. And in fact, they're just about to step into the process of doing the final, really thorough refining of the possible trajectories of the mission to the around the moon and back, that will determine very specifically what those launch options are for them month to month. So once that work is complete, then we should have a much better picture of what the opportunities will be in each month in February, March, and April. Time now T minus 45 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. We're just about 7 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will nominally make the call on the start of prop load. So as we're looking ahead to the remaining milestones for the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline, the steps needed between now and a good liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Space Launch Complex 40. Once the launch director makes the determination that they are good to step into the fueling process, tanking of the Falcon 9 begins at T-minus 35 minutes with a loading of RP-1, the fuel, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. Simultaneously, liquid oxygen will start flowing on board the rocket's booster. Half an hour before flight, SpaceX begins to load cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes after that. That helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes before takeoff, the second stage RP-1 tank is full. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, we'll start to get into the process of the thermal conditioning of the feed lines, the strong back chill down process, as SpaceX prepares to load liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. We'll see this visually manifest as the so-called big vent here at pad 40 that begins at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds and lasts just a little under 4 minutes in duration, setting the stage for upper stage lock load to begin at the 16-minute mark. Seven minutes out is when SpaceX starts to chill down the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. They flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and that helps to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And at T minus 4.5 minutes is the strong back retraction away from the rocket. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and then it stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of Falcon 9. 3 minutes before flight, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. Same will be true on the second stage about a minute afterwards. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call out that the Falcon 9 is in startup, that automated sequence means control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. At the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will then give their go for launch call if all is still on track at T minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and begin to burn as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Coming up here this morning, currently at 4:39 a.m. Eastern, 08:39 UTC, or just about 41 minutes and 41 seconds from now. Just under 38 minutes to go ahead of the planned flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. Did have a super chat here from BA Technologies. Appreciate that. Asking about the trajectory for today's launch. So now's a good time to go ahead and address that as we're awaiting the start of fueling on this Falcon 9 rocket. Upon departure from Florida's Space Coast, and specifically Space Launch Complex 40 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be heading in a northeasterly trajectory, heading along the east coast of the United States. So if we've got clear conditions in the areas of northeast Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, on up, I know we've seen some launch pictures from as far up as DC. So if you've got clear skies, you might just catch a glimpse of the Falcon 9 as it makes its climb uphill. I'd love to see your pictures. Tag us on social media. You can find us most places simply at Spaceflight Now. A couple minutes into flight will be stage separation. The first stage booster will target a landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. Booster landing is expected nearly 8.5 minutes into the flight. If all goes well, this will be the 126th good landing for that particular drone ship and the 511th booster landing for SpaceX to date. The booster on hand for today's Falcon flight is B-1080. It's set to make its 22nd flight on this mission. SpaceX is working to certify its boosters for up to 40 flights apiece. Same is true with the payload fairings, which is why they will endeavor to recover them from the waters of the Atlantic Ocean following their splashdown, supported by a parachute. Once down in the waters of the Atlantic, they'll be brought aboard a recovery vessel like the one you see pictured here on the screen. They'll be brought back through Port Canaveral and then trucked on over to the Hangar X site at the Kennedy Space Center, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. At T-minus 35 minutes and counting, assuming that the SpaceX launch director did in fact give the go-ahead for the start of tanking. Fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket is now underway. We'll be taking a closer look at the Falcon 9 here momentarily to give you a sense of the start of fueling. SpaceX has long since stopped the practice of issuing public notification via social media, that is, that tanking has begun for its Starlink missions. So we rely on visual aids for this part of the coverage. Thankfully, there's not too much heat distortion tonight, so it should be, I say fairly easy. It's easier than it is some nights or mornings, whatever time zone you're in, to determine that fueling has in fact begun. You could just barely make out the lettering of SpaceX on the rocket. You see beneath the X in SpaceX, there's a lighter shade line that runs perpendicular across the rocket just before a darker gradient. It's at that lighter point just beneath the X in SpaceX where we'll start to see a frost line form in the next couple of minutes as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the rocket's booster. We should also see some vapor in that area of the rocket as the considerably colder LOX meets the warmer, certainly more humid Florida air. Will create that vapor, which again is another helpful indication that tanking is in fact underway. 33 minutes on the clock. We should start to see some signs of this in the next couple of minutes. T minus 31 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. We are definitely starting to see some of that vapor that I was just mentioning, which means SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, and SpaceX locking into its T0 time of 4:39 a.m. Eastern, 08:39 UTC for those around the world. Now just under 28 minutes to go. If you're just now joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 10-15 mission, the flight of 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites on their way to low Earth orbit on board this Falcon 9 rocket. At this point in the count, SpaceX has begun loading cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage here in just about another minute or so. Just about 26.5 minutes remaining on the clock as we're getting ready to see the Falcon booster supporting this mission fly for a 22nd time. Let's go ahead and talk about the missions that have come before. A little bit of booster history for B-1080. Its first mission was in support of a crew flight to the International Space Station. This was a private astronaut mission known as Axiom Mission 2 or AX2, commanded by former NASA astronaut, current Axiom Space astronaut Peggy Whitson, who led her 3 crewmates on board the Dragon known as Freedom, lifting off on May 21st of 2023. That was followed up by the launch of the European Space Agency's Euclid mission on July 1st from Pad 40. A couple of Starlink missions after that. It's Starlink 6-11 on August 27th and 6-24 on October 22nd. Just as a quick point of reference, all of these dates are the dates that the mission launched based off of the T0 in UTC. So just to clarify that. Next up was the Axiom Mission 3 launch on, once again, Dragon Freedom on January 18th, 2024. This time commanded by another former NASA astronaut, Michael Lopez Alegria. Another Dragon mission for this booster, cargo flight, CRS-30, the 30th mission for SpaceX under the Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract with NASA. A couple more Starlink flights after that. It's Starlink 6-52 on April 18th and 6-62 on May 23rd. That was followed up on June 20th by the Astra 1P/SES-24 mission. Another cargo flight for this booster, this time a Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft launching their NG-21 mission to the orbiting outpost in early August of last year. At this point, we're all Starlinks bringing us up to the present. We had Starlink 10-10 on October 15th, 6-69 on November 11th, 12-1 on November 24th, 12-2 on December 23rd, 12-4 on January 13th, 10-2 on February 18th, 6-80 on March 31st, 6-75 on May 2nd, 10-32 on May 28th, 10-16 on June 25th, and most recently 10-30 on August 4th. Coming up in just about 23 minutes, we'll see the next flight, Starlink 10-15. And there you see the big vent now underway at the pad. Again, this will last roughly 4 minutes in duration as SpaceX thermally conditions the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. With the big vent now wrapped up, SpaceX is loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. Things continue to progress well towards a liftoff at 4:39 a.m. Eastern, 08:39 UTC. Taking a look at our live chat, I want to thank Donald Evans, one of our channel members, for a couple of super chats. Really appreciate that, Donald. Thanks for your support this morning. Time now, T minus 14 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. While we are, of course, most closely tracking the countdown of the Falcon 9 rocket as it's preparing to launch from Pad 40, we're also keeping tabs on things over at Space Launch Complex 41, where the countdown to the launch of an Atlas V rocket began at 12:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern, 4:49:30 UTC this morning. Giving you a brief update on where things stand with the Atlas countdown. The Atlas and Centaur stages have been powered up to begin final launch date testing and preparations ahead of fueling. Weather is 95% go for the Atlas launch. Less than 2 hours ago, they began a pre-launch test of the rocket's guidance system. In the most recent update within the last 10 minutes, ULA reports that all systems remain go at the Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center as they continue to count down towards a launch of their Atlas V rocket coming up at 8:09 a.m. Eastern, 12:09 UTC, and ULA reports that they are currently working no issues. We'll, of course, have much more to say on that mission and that launch when we get into our dedicated coverage there. Just wanted to give you all an update since their countdown is also currently running. Turning our attention back here to Pad 40 with the Falcon 9 rocket. As I mentioned earlier in the broadcast today, this is said to be SpaceX's 122nd Falcon 9 flight of the year so far. So let's take a moment to talk about the workhorse vehicle for the company. The Falcon 9, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet in height. It has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of that comes from the Falcon booster. This is B1080 in the SpaceX fleet, flying for its 22nd time, coming up in just about 12 minutes. At the base, the first stage booster are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Once again, today's drone ship is a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the rocket's upper stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside that inner stage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage, the Falcon 9 rocket, is powered by a single modified Merlin engine, referred to as a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine, characterized by the larger nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and with this particular mission, it will fire twice prior to the deployment of the 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites. Like with the first stage, the upper stage engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX. Following the Starlink deployment, there will be one final deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it's designed to burn up and eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack, as we cross the 10-minute marker in the countdown, these are the payload fairings, which are made up of a carbon composite material standing 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The 2 fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. They splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Just about 9 minutes to go on our countdown for this Falcon 9 rocket launch today. Coming up next in about 2 minutes. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps that will help to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. T minus 9 minutes and counting. Just under 8.5 minutes ago. Haven't really mentioned the weather much for this mission because honestly, there's not a whole lot to talk about this go around. Looking at the live loop from the GOES East satellite, you can see conditions are very clear over the Sunshine State. Of course, this rocket launching in the darkness of the pre-dawn morning here in Florida, but not a lot of clouds to speak of. A lot of those hanging offshore and well offshore, not in the path of this rocket as it climbs uphill, making a northeasterly turn away from the pad. And as we mentioned just a moment or two ago, weather for the Atlas launch also looking just as pristine, 95% chance for favorable conditions for an on-time departure at 8:09 a.m. Eastern. Just under 7 minutes remaining. Want to take a brief moment to talk about the payload that's on board today's Falcon 9 rocket. 28 Starlink satellites in total. This is SpaceX's 86th mission of the year, with satellites supporting the company's mega constellation. These V2 Mini optimized satellites are considerably lighter than the predecessor V2 Minis, as you can see with the difference in mass. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. These satellites were built up in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. They'll be deployed at about 172 miles or 277 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. Just hitting the 6-minute point in the count at this juncture, the rocket's first stage RP-1 tank should now be full. Coming up in now less than a minute, we should be getting views of the Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX's pad level cameras, as well as some mission audio.
Strong back retract has started.
And as you just heard, the Strong back retraction is now just getting underway. First, we'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and will stay in that position until liftoff. You can see those arms now just opening up and away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Less than 4 minutes to go before a liftoff of this vehicle. Smooth countdown by all accounts. Again, no weather concerns to speak of, so barring any technical issues that come up in the next 3.5 minutes, we should see a good liftoff of this Falcon 9 coming up at 4:39 a.m. Eastern. Oh wait, 39 UTC. T-minus 3 minutes and counting.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
With that good call out regarding the LOX tank on the booster, we should hear a similar call regarding the liquid oxygen tank on the second stage, coming up in about 30 seconds at the roughly 2-minute mark.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
With that good call, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. The additional venting you're just now starting to see are the ground gas closeouts as SpaceX releases the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad.
Ground gas closeouts.
Good confirmation of that milestone. Coming up on the final minute of the count, at which point the rocket will pivot over into its automated startup sequence.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that good call, we're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their confirmation that they are go for launch. It's coming in the next few seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that good call, we're now just a little more than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 from pad 40. "15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 10-15 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. little more than a minute into the mission, the Falcon 9 traveling faster than the speed of sound, approaching max Q, point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now passing through max Q, the Falcon 9 rocket will throttle those engines on the booster back up. Next will be the start of the MVAC chill. They will thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage prior to its
Back
first
chill.
burn. Coming up on 2 minutes into the mission now, and a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The fairing halves at the top of the rocket will jettison just before the 3-minute mark.
Vehicles following a nominal trajectory.
Main
Rocket on a nominal trajectory coming up to MECO. You see MECO? Stage
main engine
separation.
shutdown.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
And some good callouts, good visuals from the SpaceX onboard cameras. Coming up to fairing jettison momentarily. And there go the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Nice view of the Starlink stack as well as we're approaching 3.5 minutes into this mission. Coming up next will be the start of the 3-engine entry burn, where SpaceX will begin to slow that booster down quite dramatically as it prepares for landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. That entry burn said to begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 11 seconds. So just a little more than 2 minutes from now.
Both vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
Call on trajectory there. You can follow the telemetry data of both the booster and the second stage there in between the views from the Falcon 9 onboard cameras on the right-hand side of your screen. Looks like the booster is topping out at about 115 kilometers in altitude today. Will soon start to make its descent towards the drone ship, waiting for it out in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Just about 5.5 minutes into the flight so far. You're looking up through the inner stage on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right, the engine nozzle for the Merlin vacuum engine as the burn continues for that initial part of the upper stage mission. Just about 20 seconds away now from the start of the entry burn. That'll last less than 30 seconds in total. We'll try to see if we can capture that with our on-the-ground tracking
Stage 1
cameras.
FTS has saved.
But it is a bit hazy on the
Entry burn startup.
horizon.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And with the conclusion of the entry burn, SpaceX now turns its attention to the start of the single-engine landing burn.
Both vehicles continue to follow a nominal trajectory.
And with that good trajectory call, the landing burn is set to begin now in less than 1 minute, right about T plus 8 minutes into this mission.
Stage 1 transonic. Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 2 is in terminal guidance. Stage 1 landing leg deployed. Stage 1 landing confirmed. Stage 2 FTS has saved.
And a good recovery of Falcon booster B1080, completing its 22nd flight.
Impact shutdown.
Nominal park orbit insertion.
That good parking orbit now achieved, the Falcon 9's upper stage will coast until about T plus 54 minutes and 56 seconds. There will be a brief 1-second burn on that engine to circularize its orbit. That'll set the stage for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at about T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 18 seconds post liftoff. We're going to go ahead and start to wrap things up by looking back at the liftoff of this mission with our launch replays, beginning with the fixed view from our Adam Bernstein. Moving on to the wide view. And finally, moving on to the press site tracker. And we'll cap things off now with a look at the mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of that Falcon booster, that wraps up flight number 22 for B1080. This was the 539th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 122nd for the company so far in this year. This was SpaceX's 474th Falcon booster reflight, with the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. SpaceX certainly on track to reach 500 booster reflights potentially by the end of this year. If all continues to go smoothly. This was the company's 163rd orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 281st orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 336th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's where the bar chart of things currently stands. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 126th good landing on the drone ship, Shortfall Gravitas. That marked the 415th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 511th overall booster landing for SpaceX. Finally, with some overall industry stats, this was the 82nd orbital launch from Florida, the 128th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 140th from a U.S. rocket company, and the 220th launch attempt from around the world. There have been 5 orbital mishaps so far this year. Here's where the pie chart now currently stands. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this launch broadcast for the Starlink 10-15 mission. Of course, this is not the end of our broadcast day. We do have potentially 2 more missions that are currently on tap for y'all today. We have first from here in Florida, the launch of the Kuiper Atlas 3 mission. That's set to lift off at 8:09 a.m. Eastern, 12:09 UTC. Just a quick check to see if there's any further updates on the countdown. Not seeing any, but we'll have a dedicated live stream coming up for that mission, beginning about an hour prior to liftoff. Also, later tonight, SpaceX is set to launch one more Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 17-11 mission, set to fly the window that opens up at 6:47 p.m. Pacific, 9:47 p.m. Eastern, 01:47 UTC. And we'll have coverage beginning about 30 minutes prior to that launch as well. Want to thank our moderator who's been helping us out today, Aussie Space Girl, for being with us. Appreciate it, Stephanie. Thanks as always. Thanks also to our photographer, Adam Bernstein, and John Pisani for running the technical operations of the broadcast, alongside our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young. We'll be joined by our friends P. Carsons with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs for our coverage of the Atlas Kuiper launch coming up here in a few hours. So we hope you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so that you'll be alerted when that broadcast does begin. And we hope you join us right back here. Don't go too far. We'll see you very soon. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time. And until then, bye-bye.